Hey, praise the Lord, guys. I'm Straw Greenhorn. And as they went, behold, some of the watch came into the city and showed unto the chief priests all the things that were done. Now, when they assembled together with the elders, they took counsels together and gave unto the soldiers large sums of money and said unto them, Say ye that his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. And if this should make it to the governor's ears, we shall persuade him and secure thee. So the soldiers took the money and did as they were taught. And this saying is commonly reported among the Jews even to this day. So a great tragedy here, them really opening the doors for generations after them to be cursed. Because, Bible says that, cursed is he that believeth not on me. He that buildeth his not his house on me, buildeth it on the sand. This is the chief cornerstone which the builders rejected. And a child would always try to identify with their parent. It's not even in them to look for right or wrong, but they will find ways to rationalize and to side with their parent. And this is a great injustice that they did to their children, knowing that this man is the Christ and he is the Messiah. So here we have generations growing up, hating this man for no reason when he is the answer, he is the truth, and he is the life. And he came, to save and to set free. But because of the pride of one generation, remember when they accused him of casting out devils by Beelzebub, then he said, by whom do your children cast them out? Therefore they shall be your judges. Therefore they shall be your judges, because look at the door that it is you're opening right now to send them through. Generations of non-belief, disbelief, and rebellion. Some families, if you look, they all took the same profession. Like you'll see, in a certain family, everybody is police officers. Maybe everybody is doctors, even lawyers, teachers. But now here we have, whole families of non-believers. And a lot of times, we don't even stop to argue or to question, why it is that we do some of the things that we do. It's just been ingrained in us, from social conditioning, from upbringing, from our environment for so long that we're doing these things that we don't even realize that it's choices and habits that we have formed at some point, and it just flows so automatic and so seamlessly, and it seems so natural that it's hard for us. And that's why self-development is really so good, because it gives you the tool to be able to step outside of yourself and look and to see and to analyze all your behaviors and choices, your habits, in an objective way, and you are able to keep the good and throw the bad away, or even make adjustments, here and there, wherever, and make your life be about what it is that you want to do, and not based on previous generations mistakes, or their prejudices. Because this is really something we know, that the chief priests, elders, scribes, and Pharisees, they were already conspiring against Jesus. But so I must make a correction here, because in one of my previous videos, remember when they said, made the sepulchre sure, have a watch until the third day, lest his disciples come and steal him away by night and say that he is risen from the dead. And then the governor Pontius Pilate said, you have a watch, go your way and make it as sure as you can. It would seem as if that he did not give them any soldiers, but now we're seeing soldiers here, and you're making sure to let them know that they will speak for them if this should ever make it to the governor's ear, and they would deliver them from the governor's hands. So this kind of implies that they were his soldiers. Because you remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, when they came and took him, they came with a bunch of men with swords and staves, and these were from the chief priests and elders. So we have a bunch of soldiers across different squads, different battalions, different organizations, if you will, all conspiring to come against Jesus. Here they are giving bribing these soldiers. I thought one of the things about soldiers, you're supposed to be honorable, and I'm pretty sure that if they would have spoke up and told the truth, because you got to, I mean, at least at this point, these men, they got to consider whose side they're on. Are they so loyal to these chief priests and elders that they will lie and risk their heads? Because as you can see by the subtext, that's what's underlined here, is their heads, because they are the governor's soldiers, and they're not supposed to be falling asleep and leaving posts. But if they would just have told the truth, then I'm pretty sure that he would believe, because the governor, because he already knew that he was the Christ. So these soldiers here, they made a choice that they did not realize that they could go to the left or to the right. They automatically went to one side, and they didn't realize that it was a choice. It was because it wasn't presented as such. And when you see people in desperation, sometimes you just want to help them out, because that's what basically was happening with these guys. All right, so let's dive into these scriptures. So he starts out saying, and as they went, behold, some of the watch came into the city and told unto the chief priests all the things that were done. So they being the two Marys, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and Mary Magdalene. So we just saw where the angel descended of the Lord descended from heaven and rolled back the stone from the tomb, and there was a great earthquake, his countenance being like lightning and his raiment white as snow. And the men that were watching the tomb, they did shake and became as dead men. And the angel, he spoke unto the Mary, saying that he's not here, he is risen. Behold, he goeth before you into Galilee, and there shall you see him. go and tell the disciples that he going before them into Galilee. And so that's where they were headed right now when it says, and as they went. So they were going right now to tell the other disciples that, he is risen, and they saw him, and they even spoke to him. And behold, he going before you into Galilee, and there you shall you see him. So while they were going to tell the disciples, here we see some of the men. So it wasn't all of them, all of those that took watch, because it says some of them that took watch came into the city and told unto the chief priests all the things that were done. So, the remnant, what did the remnant do? Were they still just watching the tomb to see if anything would change? Maybe it was all an illusion, and Jesus would just reappear back in there. Because like I said in my other videos, up until this point, they were thinking it was just some great magic trick. And if they stayed there long enough, then his body would reappear, and they would see that it was just one big facade. Because some of them are here reporting, maybe they didn't all go because they didn't want to make it seem, that it was a bunch of them, a great number of them, because then their competence right now would be called into question. How can it be so many of you guys and you guys fell asleep? You guys all fell asleep. Because with soldiers, they usually take watches, right? Even with Jesus when he walked on water. Because the Bible says that, behold, in the fourth watch of the night, or was it the third watch? It was the third or fourth watch. Cometh Jesus walking on the water, and then that's when they saw him. So soldiers, they take watches because they're trained to always be on the lookout. Somebody's gotta always be looking out. Not that the enemy is just gonna run in, loud with blaring alarms and making themselves known. It's gonna be like a silent, creep up attack. But one person, at least one person, at least one is always watching. And right now it sounds like it's a bunch of them because the governor, he said, make it as short as you can. And like I said, I must clarify that mistake because the way how he was speaking, and because like if you pay attention to how he was trying to deliver Jesus, because he was the one that nominated Jesus' name next to Barabbas. Jesus maybe wasn't even supposed to be mentioned as one of the ones that who he could pardon and release, at the feast, because it was customary to release one. Even when his wife told him, see that don't have nothing to do with that just man. So it sounded like he was just sending them on their way. You go and have a watch, make it sure. Now here we see his soldiers because they are, fearing for their head, because how could it be so many of you guys and his disciples came by night and stole the body away. So you see, they were actually really getting themselves in more trouble than if they would have just told the truth, because they're relying on these men to secure their lives. Because that's essentially what's going on right here. We're going to say that this is what happened, and people are going to talk. And King Herod, he never even saw Jesus, and he was so excited to see some miracle performed by him. He was looking forward so much to see him, when he thought that it was John that was risen from the dead after he had beheaded John the Baptist. So this word is going to get around, and here they are trusting their heads into the hands of these men who are so wicked and evil. If you think about it, if it was to come to that, then what would the chief priests and elders, they hate Jesus so much, what would they do? You think that they would side with the soldiers, or would they not rather say, yes, see, and even these, soldiers were in on it, because you see, they purposefully fell asleep and made the disciples come and steal his body away. Cause there's no, and then they'll start to point out the truth. There's no way that there were so many of you guys, that fell asleep all at the same time. So then the soldiers would be in a dilemma, because they can't say that, well, you see, you guys gave us a large sum of money, as we're about to see, because then their integrity would bring them into double trouble, because they're now here they are taking bribes, so that's their integrity gone. A soldier, that's kind of like all he has. Soldiers are not known for riches and wealth. They're known for their power, strength, and their word, their honor. So here you guys are taking bribes. So it's not like they could bring it up and say, you see, you guys, gave us a large sum of money to tell this lie. Then they would, these chief priests and others, they would even deny that and say, you see, you guys are making up fairy tales. Because if they were so willing to bring all these false witnesses to accuse Jesus, because, this would be their perfect cover if they would just, deny the soldiers, say you guys were in on it the whole time, and then even pointed out to the governor that, your soldiers are no good. What are you going to do about it? And, because here they're already fearing for their heads, because they know that that's what will come off if the integrity of this thing was breached. So they couldn't say that they had taken the bribes, and neither could they say that they fell asleep, because then how could so many of you guys see their integrity would be so much being called right now. And then the chief priests and elders, they could secure their argument by denying these soldiers, saying you guys are taking bribes, you guys are falling asleep. We don't know what to believe. And then they could walk away and say, you see, Jesus, he's such a con artist. He's such trickster, such a faker, that he has all these people conspiring to help him with his lie that he rose from the dead. And then that could really cement the argument that they were making, and they could just use this gimmick and play this on the whole region, and even start to question Jesus' integrity itself. Were any of these miracles real? Were they all a conspiracy? Were actors? People being possessed with devils? Were they just pretending? And then when he would lay his hand on them, then they would just, come back to their right mind, because they were never crazy to begin with or possessed. The blind man, and even, they could say that, well, he wasn't blind, he could see the whole time, but he was just waiting. They were just waiting for him to, lay his hands on them and then heal them so that they could pretend that they received their sight, even their hearing, or even being able to speak. What a huge conspiracy. So you see, if these soldiers right here, they're not really thinking smart. 'Cause you see, if they would have just came out and told the truth, we're looking at your lives here, soldiers, your life, not the reputation. Is your life versus the reputation of these chief priests and elders. And I'm pretty sure that if it came down to it consciously, you would choose your life. But here you are, trusting your livelihood into their hands, knowing just how dishonorable they can be. But you guys both did the same thing. You smote him and spit on him. And you guys put on the crown of thorns and the scarlet robe. Because if you would have just told the truth, then so the chief priests, they would look like fools. Because the word would have got around. You guys seen the angel that sat on the tomb, his body being risen and gone. But with today's advances in technology, science, and medicine, we understand now more pathways of the human brain and thinking and psychology. Because what I have available to me today, they did not have. So I can look at them and tell them all these things. But to them, it was just like being lost in a wave, like a huge wave. Surfers that surf. The wave, it carries you. You don't really, dictate. You have to sit there and wait for the wave to decide to come. And when it comes, it comes. And then it's up to you to just go and ride it. All right, so let's continue. It says, so while they went in the way, some of the watch came into the city and showed unto the chief priests and elders all the things that had happened. So now when they took counsel together and they assembled with the elders, they gave large money unto the soldiers. So, being so desperate to protect their life, these men coming onto the chief priests and elders, they said they told them what everything that happened. They saw the angel, the earthquake. They saw him speak, to the Marys, saying, fear not, Jesus who you seek is not here, he is risen. Come see the place where the Lord lay. They sat there and watched all these things happen. And they came on there, and I'm pretty sure they told all these things. So then when the chief priests, who's running these guys right here? Are they so blind with hatred and jealousy and envy? Are they so blind with disbelief that they can't, just say, okay, all right, so this is something. Was there not one rational person in there to say, all right, so we're seeing enough things to know that this guy, he's the real deal. And if any of the things that he said about us is true, then we are in trouble. But they were so blind with pride and hatred that here they are, going to be willing to bribe these soldiers. Say they gave unto them large money. So we're spending a lot of money here. We already spent 30 pieces of silver to Judas. Now whatever this is to these soldiers, it says a large money. So they assembled together with the elders. So that's a whole bunch of authorities in there. And these men being authority, you would hope at least one of them would be led by the Spirit of God. That one of them would have the mind of God, the heart of God. You would expect and hope that one of them would be honorable. You would expect that one of them would at least be able to speak out. Because there's no way that a bunch of people get together like this and we don't have one person that is, awakened, so to speak, by all these things happening. Because when they came and they told them, first, all right, so they probably started out saying, so we heard an earthquake, and then we saw an angel, and he rolled back the stone, and he sat thereon. Did they see when Jesus came out the tomb? Did Jesus physically walk out the tomb, or did he just like vanish? Because I remember in one of the gospels here, after he was risen, when they saw him, they said Rabboni, and then he vanished out of their sight. So we saw him vanish there. Did he physically walk out the tomb for these men to see him and to say, wow, look, there he is? Or did he just vanish from the tomb? So we saw the angel, and he spoke to Mary, and he's going into Galilee. So here, reconnaissance. You guys are soldiers, right? You guys send scouts out to get, information on the enemy and, try to uncover their tactics, try to uncover their plans, their battle plans, and the strategy that they're going to use. So you sat there and you listened to this angel speak to the Marys, saying, behold, you go before you into Galilee. So there you have some inside information right there. We're gonna expect him to see him in Galilee. So what are we gonna do about this? Are we gonna go and lay in wait and try to lay hands on him again? Are we gonna go there and lift him up as the king that he is? We know he's going in Galilee. What are we gonna do about this? I guess with the story that they're going with, that the disciples came and stole the body away by night, that would make no sense, because we all saw him die on the cross. They pierced his side, he didn't move. That's why they pierced his side to check that he was dead, and that's when the water and the blood came out. So we know that he was dead. So why would the disciples come and steal him away if he was dead? Did they lay hands on him and bring him back from the dead like he did for others? Because if they had stole him away, maybe that's why they took him. Like there's so many questions. So when they're at this council giving their eyewitness, there was nobody to step up and say, you know what? We've been going about this the wrong way. We've been looking at it the wrong way. We've been looking at it, from the wrong point of view. Because this man, he has done enough things to convince us right now that he is the Messiah. And if you look in the world today, it's the same spirit that's going on. It's just taking a different manifestation. You see, for them back in the day, all they had to do was acknowledge that he was the Lord, that he was the Christ, and that would have been enough for them. But like so many layers of deception have been poured on our world that is no longer not saying that he's not the Messiah, but is people wanting to live alternative lifestyles, same-sex marriages, whoremongering, sexual immorality, especially, and chasing all kind of things that we had no business, lifestyles. We don't just deny him in words as they did. In this day, what I'm trying to say is that we deny him in lifestyle. It's not just saying that he's a faker, he didn't raise from the dead, his disciples stole him away. It's not just saying that he didn't, bring people back from the dead, that he cast out devils by Beelzebub. It's not just saying that he's fake and these are all magic trick and lies and deception. We don't deny him in words because that would be too easy. That would be too easy for the devil, and he has to get more creative over time. So we deny him in lifestyle. That's how we deny Jesus today. As strongly as these men held on right now to their reason and were unwilling to change, we hold on to our lifestyle and are unwilling to change. So we don't deny him in words anymore, but we deny him in lifestyle. So when they were assembled together with the elders, they gave large money unto the soldiers and told them to say his disciples came by night and stole him away while we slept. Like I keep saying, while you slept, there's no way that all of you guys are going to be sleeping. If this gets to the governor, are you willing to put your life into these dishonorable men's hands? Where if they were to deny you and let you lose your head, they could pile that on top of their story and make it even more believable. So their story would be made more believable by you guys losing your head. And you already see the length that they are already willing to go to. So say his disciples stole him away by night. So there's no honor amongst these guys. And then it says, and if it comes to the ears of the governor, we will persuade him and deliver you and secure you. So now we're hoping that you guys will have the verbal ability to persuade the governor. Why? Why do they believe that they are able to do that? Because remember, the governor, he wanted to release Jesus at the feast, and they persuaded him to let him be crucified. Not even to just keep him in jail and make him a prisoner. That wasn't good enough. That wasn't good enough to just keep him in there for whatever long period of years under heavy bondage. No, it was only necessary that he be crucified. So we were able to persuade him to do that. Because this persuasion is, you're assuming it's going to be automatic. But what if the governor holds to his guns and say, you know what, enough of this. My wife told me to see that I have nothing to do with that just man. She suffered many things in the dream this night because of him. That's the difference between a person who has, great authority, who's willing to stand against the grain. Because these chief priests and others, they had the authority, but they were not willing to stand. But would, the governor, would he have stood and said, all right, enough of this nonsense. I have soldiers falling asleep. I have soldiers receiving bribes. Why did you guys take bribes? What happened? And I'm sure if he questioned them and pressed hard enough, he would get down to the nitty gritty of everything that happened. All right, so then the Bible says that the soldiers took the money and did as they were taught. So they accepted the bribes. So these soldiers, so far they took all his belongings. They parted his raiment and they cast lots for his coat of many colors that was woven without seam from top to bottom. So now here they're getting paid also. What a payday for them. We know that he that took 30 pieces of silver, Bible says that he fell down and his bowels gushed out. Did anything happen to them for receiving this money? So then it says, and this saying is commonly reported among the Jews even to this day. And here is the real damage. It's okay for you guys to hate and be blind and hold on to pride and just lawlessness and all dishonor. You see, if you guys want to do that to yourself, that's fine. I believe every man has a right to choose how he will live his life. But with this, you're choosing for the next generation. You're choosing for future generations. How many generations have you damned because of this? So now we have, parents who grew up as children hearing these stories, telling them to their children, don't believe that Jesus of Nazareth, he's a liar. He casts out devils because he himself is a devil. He tricked the people with all his magic tricks. He was a sorcerer. That's how he did it. It was a whole huge conspiracy with his disciples. They tried to say that he rose from the dead and they came and stole his body out the tomb. They hid the body. We couldn't find it. All the other things that they would tell their children. And now we have these children growing up in this. What's the chances that they will ever, come to the truth. Bible says that, unless you believe on the Son of Man, that you shall not be saved. There's no other name. There's no other name that your children can go and seek to make it into, eternity. There's no other way. There's no other name. Where are they gonna go? What are they gonna do? Then you have this devil. You guys rejected the truth. Devil, he can feed you any lie that you want. So this saying is commonly reported among the Jews even to this day. I have many Jew friends. They say they don't believe he's the Messiah. How many generations did this pass down? And they believe it so strongly. Like I said earlier when I started my video earlier, children are so willing to identify with their parents. They'll defend them and rationalize everything. Because, to them, their parents are their greatest heroes. But what happens when you have a parent that has chosen something so dishonorable? Where do you leave that child? I am Straw Greenhorn.